So this part, we're still researching it and had a lot of preliminary, like great, I'm going to say great results, right? And so what this is based off of is there's a woman, Kathy Moore wrote a book, it's called Map It. And what it talks about is when you're training, I worked for a consulting company, and one of the problems we were having is onboarding new consultants, right? And did the typical things. Somebody built a learning management system. They created, the woman running it was really sharp. She had done this a couple of times at different organizations, created this concept of micro-learning, so there were bite-sized things that you could go and learn or go search out if you had a specific question. So we had that. Had a huge depth of PowerPoint decks that we put everything in. Didn't really take and convert them into Word documents because we were hiring fairly senior people. So typically if they had the presentation, they knew from the presentation the information, right? And if they didn't, they could ask. And so we had this information, and we even had physical onboarding. Like we would go through and we would talk to them and go through scenarios. And so what Kathy Moore talks about in her book is, it's interesting, and she said, look, you don't want people to just know stuff. You want them to be able to do stuff. And what happens is when we do things or make decisions, there's a big latency between the time we make the decision and the actual result. So what happens is when you get to that result, you don't always remember what decisions you made that led to that result, or maybe you can't trace them back. So what action mapping does, or in learning management system, they call them branching scenarios. What the branching scenarios do is they're almost like the old school video games where you would go through and you'd solve problems and it would take you down different paths. But what this does is it poses a problem, and then you walk through by answering questions, and it takes you down a path, and you either get to the right solution or maybe an okay solution, but not the perfect solution. And then what happens is you see the direct effect of the decision you made, and you go back and try different paths, and you can see the different responses based on the paths. And it's a powerful way of learning things. And so she posits that this is the way that adults need to learn in a work environment. And so what I've been prototyping, and this is a result of one of the prototypes, is can the large language model, can it generate these branching scenarios on the fly? And the reason I want to do that is that everybody's at a different point in knowledge about all kinds of things, or at the point that they care about something specifically. So if I'm chatting with, the lens has context, it's got the memory, so it has context of what I'm chatting about. And then I could do one of two things. At any point in there, the human can say, or the user could say, hey, give me a scenario about this situation that I'm reading about. And it could dynamically generate the scenario, and then it would walk them through different questions and scenarios. And they could either save that for later or go through it and get the idea and be done with it. And you can see how powerful that is, right? Because what happens is that it gives it to them in context, right? You could further do it. So basically, as they're asking questions, you can understand, the model understands how much they understand, right? So at some point, you could suggest scenarios to the end user. So this is very cool, and for an onboarding standpoint, e-learning, I think it's got a lot of potential. It's cool.